I have the privilege of introducing Mike Williams. A couple of months ago, Phelps and I were talking at the PCMA board meeting, and as only Phelps would do, he said, mate, he said, I just heard the best speaker. Now, Phelps and I have been around, probably me longer. I don't want to admit that I'm older than Phelps, but I am. But, you hear a lot of speakers, and I thought, okay. And then a week later, he said, would you introduce this gentleman? And I read through his bio and had a chance to spend time with Mike today. And I know that a lot of you know that he's presently the Chief Marketing Officer of the Grand Prix of America. But you read through this gentleman's resume, Vice President of Marketing of the San Francisco 49ers, I'm thinking, boy, it's got to be tough to market a, world champion Super Bowl 4 times, the New Jersey Devils. For those of you that are Chicago fans, the Blackhawks, he was with the Anaheim Ducks, Disney. He was also J. Walter Thompson, handled Ford Motor Company. He's an adjunct professor at San Francisco University. And along with that is an Emmy nominee, which I thought was pretty cool. But I'm really looking forward to hearing this gentleman. We were comparing notes about playing college football, although he looks like he could still play college football. I can't. Help me welcome Mike Williams. Mike.
Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And yes, I did play a little football. I was a kicker. Really? Really? Come on, if we're going to have a good dialogue, we have to be more lively. We have to get into this. There needs to be a little bit of a two-way conversation with this. But I used to joke about that all the time. And then after one of the last keynotes I gave, I went out and was looking at all the tweets and all the posts and such. And there was a woman that said, great keynote, phenomenal speech, really good by CMO and former kicker Michael Williams. So the amount of grief I got from the guys I played football with after that, I'm not going to joke like that anymore. Thank you. I truly mean it, genuinely. Thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you this afternoon. And the reason I say that is because I've sat out there before. I've sat in your seat where I've sat and listened to someone talk a little bit about something that they wanted to sort of help communicate to the group. And in a lot of cases, I've heard some really good speakers. In some cases, I've heard some that weren't so good. What I try to do is I try to have a conversation. I try to talk with the group. I try to let you in on a little bit of the experiences that I've had, some of the things I've learned throughout my career, and most importantly, some things that hopefully you can take back and apply to things that you guys do yourself. Now, I will tell you, I'm not arrogant enough to think that every single thing I say is going to apply to you directly. I'm not going to say that everything I talk about is going to be the silver bullet that ultimately fixes everything. But what I will tell you is that there will be some valuable insights that you will absolutely connect with, things that will make sense to you, things that will help apply to whatever your job is. It doesn't matter. It won't matter if it's accounting. It won't matter if it's marketing. It won't matter if you're a CEO or you're an administrative assistant or anyone within the company. What we're going to talk about is the ability to ultimately create this synergy, right? And it all starts with thought. It all starts with positioning. So you talked about sports before. You talked about the ability, it's actually 5-time Super Bowl champion 49ers. But with that, let's talk about the romance of sports. Let's talk about what it is that really sort of embodies sports. So has anybody ever seen this picture before? No, you guys were in New York, so you're cheating. This is an amazing picture. This was the Christmas Day truce during the World War between German and English soldiers. Stop and think about that for a second. The day before, these guys were shooting each other, trying to kill each other. The day after, they were going back to shooting and trying to kill each other. But on this day, on this specific day, it was sports that unified them. It's incredible. Where else would you find this opportunity for an 80-year-old man and an 8-year-old boy to have anything in common, other than bloodline, with the ability to connect through sports? What about the ability for someone to get into a cab in New York City, completely different background, speak different languages, and have a sports event on the radio, and have the simple question of, what's the score, to have them connect? But one of the difficulties with sports, one of the things that truly makes it unique, is you don't control the final product. Imagine the difficulty in that. Imagine the difficulties that all of you face, and then stop and put it against this. I wasn't with the team when they were the 5-time Super Bowl champion 49ers. I was with the team when they were the 2-14 49ers. I was with the team when they were their 4-12 49ers. When they were so bad, they had the #1 draft pick. But when you hold the role of overseeing and managing and responsible for stewarding the brand of that team, and you don't control the final product, you have to work to think differently. You have to think about the engagement. You have to think about the things that make a difference, to connect with people, that are those touch points, because that truly is where you're going to make a difference. Imagine with the associations, with your meetings, with your clients. Imagine if you wanted to promise something on the end and work through all the different verticals and things you would ultimately have to make sure that you deliver that on the opposite end. But within sports, most of the time, that doesn't happen. And in almost every single case, you're talking about a product that people can watch from afar. I can ask who your favorite team is. We're here in Georgia, so who's your team? Falcons. Do you own merchandise? Absolutely. Do you always watch the games? Never miss one on TV. When's the last time you bought tickets and actually went to the stadium? Oh yeah, don't do that. Think about that. So when you think about sports, and you think about this point of really coming at it from a different manner, one of the first things that came into place is there's no such thing as sports marketing. It's marketing. It just so happens that the product that you're marketing is out of sports. So all the same principles, all the same guiding factors, all the same thought process and strategies that have to go into place, you have to do. It just so happens you're dealing with sports. And again, when you think about things, especially with you move forward and positioning and talking about your brand, you have to think differently. If you don't, you will simply get passed by. This is a great quote because it speaks directly to business. It speaks directly not just to marketing, not just to sales, but to business as a whole. My kingdom for a horse. It's about timing. Does anybody know who said this? King Richard III. Stop and think about this for a moment. Here's a man who had everything, as far as his eyes could see. Probably had a stables of horses. But at a point where his kingdom was crumbling around him and everything was falling apart, he went from having everything to be willing to give everything for what he wanted. It's about timing. It's about positioning. It's about thinking differently. Right now, there are over 7 billion people on the planet. Of those 7 billion, 50% are under the age of 30. There's usually a gasp at this point, because if that doesn't scare you, it should. And guess what? Out of those under the age of 30, 96% of them belong to some sort of social community where they trust what is said within that community more than what's marketed, communicated, or told. Right now, if Facebook was a country, if you were to take Facebook and the amount of people on Facebook itself, from a population standpoint, it would be the 3rd largest country in the world, only behind China and India. Wow. When you stop and think about this, this isn't just things you need to be aware of. This is the way that things are happening today. Welcome to socialnomics. It's about making connections in a manner, in a time, and ultimately in the platform that people most feel comfortable. It's no longer a matter of trying to get them to come to you. It's a matter of you coming to them. But you stop and think, has it always been like this? Has it changed? Well, sure. A long time ago, right, we didn't have to deal with this stuff. Well, you did, right? I mean, people back then talked. People back then spent time together. They weren't involved with all the news and all the social aspects of stuff. Well, the truth of the matter is, it just continues to evolve. Right? We've gone from walking, hunting, and gathering to a point where you have people that trip because they're watching their phone as they're going. The truth of the matter is, this next slide is probably the greatest sort of indication of where we are, right? Just take this in for a moment. If the good Lord himself was to come down from the heavens and come down right here with you right now, in a lot of cases, the first response would be, sure, what's your handle? I'll follow you. It'd be fantastic. No, it'd be great. Can I get you on LinkedIn as well? Can I? No. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about follow. But that's the first response. That's where people's mindset is. If you stop and think about how you reach these people, how you connect with them, It's the wave of the future. And I'm not telling you stuff you don't already know, but it's a matter of thinking differently. There are 2.4 billion brand conversations taking place every single day. And the speed at which these conversations are taking place is mind-boggling. Every single minute, there's over 2 million YouTube videos put up, 204 million emails being sent, Twitters, posts, photos being shared. The speed at which it continues to grow, it's really amazing. But it's really hard to try to conceive where it's going to be going from here. For those of you who have children, and those of you who do marketing, and those of you who think about how they used to break down the different segments within marketing, it used to be 18 to 25, 25 to 35, 35, 45 plus, et cetera. That's changed. I have a 14-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old daughter. And we have friends that have kids that are a little bit older than that, later teens, some in early college. Before, when you would stop and think about the way things evolved through those groups, it took a lot longer to evolve. But now you notice the difference between preference, usage. You have to think differently. The difference between that 21-year-old and that 17-year-old is a little bit different. The difference between the 17-year-old and the 14-year-old is vastly different. And the difference between a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old is completely different. The kids that are going to be coming up now are doing things that haven't even been invented yet. You have to think differently. How about this as an example? I found this online. This is fantastic. Dear Santa, this is what I would like. http://. It's not the note anymore. It's not, hey, Dad, Mom, help me mail this into to Santa to the North Pole. No, I'm going to go online. I'm going to ultimately get the URL address, and we're going to jot it down because you know what? Santa has elves that are real fast. We're just going to work through this. Think differently. You have to ask yourself, no matter what you do, first and foremost, you have to ask, and the point of thinking differently, are you a brand or are you a commodity? Because there's a big difference. There's a big difference. You can come back to a point where you're saying, I'm a service, I'm a commodity. That's fine. I'm an association, I'm a commodity. That's fine. I'm telling you you're wrong. Each and every one of you, you are your own brands. And you have to think about it in that manner to differentiate yourself. If you just do it as a point of being a service, if you just do it as a point of being a commodity, if you just do it as an association, eventually you will fail. Let's talk about coffee. This young lady, do you drink coffee? Perfect. If I had 2 cups of coffee, the one on this side actually tastes better, proven tastes better than this one. This one that tastes better actually costs less. It's actually even more easy to find. Which coffee are you going to take? This one costs less, tastes better. Which one are you going to choose? Choose this one, right? But at the end of the day, when you stop and you think about the way these things are done, it's not the case. Proven fact, McDonald's coffee tastes better than Starbucks. But there's not one of you in this room that are going to turn around and say, hey guys, let's go for a meeting. Let's all meet at McDonald's for some coffee. Right? You just won't. Because one's a brand, one's a commodity. In fact, if I think, I'm not sure, I haven't heard the latest advertising down in Atlanta, but there's places right now where McDonald's is offering and advertising. You could buy all the coffee you want for $1. Doesn't matter if it's a small, if it's a medium, if it's a gallon. You could buy all the coffee you want for simply $1. Are you a brand? Are you a commodity? At the end of the day, Starbucks is not about coffee any more than Nike is about shoes. They're not. Nike's actually even come out recently and said they're actually more of a technology company than they are an apparel company. What are you doing to differentiate your business? Challenge you. What are you doing to think differently? And when I say think differently, it's not just about marketing. It's about the way you attack things in your business all the time. How you address problems, how you create culture, how you establish the position of what your brand is, what your company is, and as leaders and people that are responsible for driving the business forward, how do you think differently? Beats headphones. Probably one of the greatest case studies, successes in the country, right? When they came out and they talked about what they were going to do, they didn't sell themselves. They didn't market themselves. They didn't brand themselves as headphones. They sold themselves as headphones, they'd be $30. Beats are $300. You want to know why? Thought differently. As an artist, you are not hearing the music the way I intended it for you to hear. So what we're offering you is a better way to hear the music. Are those headphones? No. Those aren't headphones. We're offering you a better way to hear the music. That's thinking differently. This isn't a camera. If GoPro was out right now selling and marketing themselves as a camera, they would have been just like any other number of companies that have come out and done this before. But the fact of the matter is GoPro is an extension into the user's life. So Tom, who's the weekday accountant that everyone sees in there with his glasses and sits under the fluorescent lights and doesn't do anything, guess what? He's a base jumper on weekends. And this GoPro allows everybody to have a little bit of an insight into who he is and what his life is. Talk about taking culture to heart. The founder of GoPro, every Thursday, great story, every Thursday at 1 o'clock they shut the offices down. And every employee who was given a GoPro, by the way, is told they have to leave the office and do something they're passionate about. Doesn't matter what it is, and it doesn't need to be extreme. It doesn't need to be skydiving. It doesn't need to be swimming with sharks. If going home and sewing is your passion, if reading is your passion, if bike riding, if taking your kids to the playground is your passion, do whatever you want. Just make sure you have a GoPro with you. This is not an energy drink. If you were to talk to young kids right now, the youth, they wouldn't recognize Red Bull as an energy drink. They'd recognize it as an extreme sport, as a lifestyle. Think differently. The amount of money and the amount of exposure and the amount of growth that Red Bull has wasn't because of how it tastes. It's because of what it represents. That's the difference. Think about all the other energy drinks out there. Drink it because it'll make you feel better. Drink it, it'll help give you a pep in the afternoon. Drink it for this. No. We help create a better lifestyle for you. If it was just an energy drink, it'd be one thing. It'd be a commodity. But Red Bull in this turn, the way it's positioned, the way it's represented, the way it's consumed, it's recognized as a brand. In some cases, people could take it too far. This is an actual picture, right, from inside Twitter's offices. I'm not lying. For God's sakes, please, if there's a fire, don't tweet about it until after you're out of the building. Please. The reason that's so important is when I talk about taking brand to heart, and I talk about doing things from start to finish. So I'll go back, I'll throw in a sports analogy. I won't do many, but I'll do a couple. For those of you who played sports or have kids that played sports, or even notice a little bit about football, they have a thing called a blocking sled. It's one of the greatest equalizers of all time. You got a sled, 5 spots, and there's nowhere to hide. If everyone hits the sled at the same pace, at the same time, with the same sacrifice and the same willingness to do whatever is necessary to drive that sled forward, it goes forward. But if this guy on this side isn't willing to sacrifice and work under the same direction and the same mindset of what everyone else is doing, you know what happens? It starts to turn. It starts to turn. If you turn around enough, eventually you're just going to go in a circle. It's so important to make sure that everyone understands direction, no matter what you do. And I want to make sure we talk about that again because it doesn't matter. You don't necessarily just have to be a marketing guy. You don't necessarily have to do something. Whatever your business is, there needs to be a concise and clear understanding from everyone about who your brand is, what it represents. So you take an iceberg. Everyone understand and know what the rule of an iceberg is? Only 10% of an iceberg is actually what shows above the surface. 90% of an iceberg is underwater. It's that 90% that'll doom you. Everyone always wants to talk about the very, very high level, very visual things you see, but it's all the stuff under the water that sometimes you don't pay that close attention to. That's what will really put you in. It wasn't the iceberg that sank the Titanic. All right, well, figuratively, literally it was, but figuratively, it was all the things that led up to it. Bad communication, arrogance, poor design, all these things, and they ultimately thought they got by it. But it wasn't until the iceberg under the water, under the surface, ripped the hole in the bottom of the ship that sank them. I've had people ask me before, what exactly is a brand? Right? What is a brand and how do you sort of define it? I've defined it this way. A brand is 1 part expression and 2 parts experience. You want to know why? It's easy to say anything. It's really easy to say something. But it's a lot harder to deliver on it. In today's world, within the social community, within the currency of what that social community offers, the experience isn't just the experience of what you deliver to that one person, but you have to make sure that you deliver it to the person that they entrusted and they spoke to within their social community themselves. You can say whatever you want. The experience is really what drives home the difference, no matter what you do. People expect big wows. So as Bill mentioned, I worked for Disney at one point. When you go to Disney and you go with the kids or whatever the case may be, people expect the big wows. They expect to see the pyro going off and they Cinderella coming across and Tinkerbell on the guide wire with all the fireworks, all the parades and everything else. But at the end of the day, it's the little wows that make a difference. That's where you make the biggest impact. Quick story about Disney. How many of you guys have ever gone to a theme park? How many of you guys have gone to a mall someplace, lost your car? I have, right? So at Disney right now, they've taken an instance, they've taken a little wow and turned it into something where it can make a huge impact. So you go to Disney, you go with the family, you get there, you spend way too much money, you try to cram everything in, right? Everyone's shouting their head, yes, everyone knows. But because you're only there for the day, you try to cram everything in within this time. Mom's yelling at dad, dad's yelling at the kids are yelling and crying at the end of the day, and everything's going bad. And the last thing you need is to come down and figure out, where the hell's my car? Where is my car? At this point, Disney comes in. It's not the fireworks. It's not Tinkerbell. They come up and say, sorry, sir, we understand how aggravating this is. Let me help you. What time did you come to the park this morning? About 10 o'clock. That's fantastic. What way did you come in? Well, I came in off the 5. I'm using Disneyland from California. Oh, perfect. When you came in, did you pull all the way through or did you park behind a car? I parked behind a car. Questions you can answer. Thank you, sir. If you'd come with me, we're going to help you find your car right now. Because of the little wows, because of the ability to work through the knowledge that they have within their customers, within their business, they know what the attendance is going to be at that time of year, the amount of traffic patterns coming in. They've now taken a miserable experience, what could have been something that was going to be awful, because the last thing you're going home at the end of the day is you're not going to remember the great parade, you're not going to remember all the great rides you went on, you're going to remember that you walked around for 2 hours looking for your car, yelling and screaming and cursing. Now you know what you're going to do when you go home? How the hell did they do that? How did they do that? It's the little wows that make a difference. It doesn't necessarily just have to be big wows. This is a great story. So the last Winter Olympics in Olympic Village, Molson did a deal for all the Canadian athletes where they put a refrigerator in there stocked with beer, and all the Canadian athletes had to do was go up with their Canadian passport and put it up there, and out came a beer. Became so wildly successful, athletes from all these other countries start coming up and going, can I borrow your passport just for a second, please? One machine. Global impact. Think different. I love this story. This is fantastic. In Canada, they were having a whole bunch of issues with the bus and the transit authority. People complaining, buses aren't running on time, and when they are running on time, they're too crowded. What are you going to do? Old adage, old way of thinking. Let's put more buses on. Let's hire more drivers. Let's put more buses on. Let's just do it and not be bothered with it. No. No. Let's think differently. So in some instances, they actually installed swings at the bus stops. You want to know what happened? All the complaints went down. Stop and look at this. When's the last time you think this elderly couple actually was on a swing? Right? There's actually stories, when I talk to people, there's stories where these same people that would complain before, they were on the swings, a bus would come, and they'd say, no, you know what, just go by, I'll catch the next one at this point. Think differently. It's not the big wows, it's the little wows. As a company, as an individual, what are you going to do to look at everyday problems, look at every opportunity to make a difference? Is it window washers at a children's hospital? Or is it the ability for you to make a difference? Can we just put these window washers in superhero costumes? Absolutely. How much time did that take? How much budget did that take? Don't tell me it all falls back to budget. Don't tell me that it has to be big, giant ideas. Don't tell me that there has to be a committee of people that get involved before they do stuff. You have the ability to make a difference. They made a difference. But you have to be transparent. You have to be. You can't be dishonest. You can't be disingenuous in today's world, especially within social, because people will call you on it. So even the great Oprah, right, even the great and mighty Oprah Winfrey, who can do no wrong, right, everyone loves her no matter whatever the case is, trips up. And people will call you on it because at the end of the day, good old Oprah, right, supporting Microsoft. I love that Surface. It's fantastic. I've already bought 12 of them. It's going to be great. But it's unfortunate that she sent it out from her iPad. Wow. Boy, thanks, Oprah. I appreciate that. They'll call you on it. Think different. Are you on the same page as everyone else within your organization? Are you on the? We got PGA guys here, right? This is fantastic, right? So at the end of the day, I love this picture. So you got marketing guys going, download the app. It's the most fantastic app you've ever seen. It's going to make your experience better. The ops guys go, don't you dare. Don't you dare. What's driving your business? What is that core functionality? What's that core essence that's driving your business that's forcing you, not allowing, forcing you to think differently? It's all connected. It's all connected. How do you make better decisions? Going back to Starbucks for a second. It's not about coffee. Starbucks has this instance where they've driven it down to a point of 3 words, right? When people first asked Howard Schultz why Starbucks was going to be so successful, it's because he said, we're not going to change your habits. We don't want to change you from having coffee at home. We don't want to change you from having coffee at work. We want to be that third place. We want to be that place that you go that's special for you. So when they boil it down to those 3 words that really drive it, coffee is nowhere in those words. Those 3 defining words for them are everyday, rewarding moments. What Starbucks wants to be to you is something that you enjoy every day. Whether it is the coffee, whether it's their double latte, green, half soy, milk, chai, whatever it may be, or maybe it's just coming in and just sitting for a while. It's a change in mind. Every single day, every day, rewarding. We want you to reward. When you think of Starbucks, this isn't just coffee. It's a moment to reward yourself. We know it's hectic at home. We know it's crazy at work. Put all that aside. When you come in here, this is a safe place. Nike's 3 words. Authentic, athletic performance. It's not about shoes. It's not about T-shirts. It's about being authentic and allowing you, as an athlete, as a man, a woman, whatever the case may be, to give you a better opportunity to be a better athlete. No matter what you do. Whether it's walk, whether it's run, whether it's play football, basketball, cricket, what have you. That's what it's about. What defines you? What drives your business? What forces you to think differently? You have to, because the public, your customers, and the people throughout there right now are empowered like never before. They are digitally connected, we know that. They're socially networked, we know that. But most of all, they're better informed. They don't just make decisions off the cuff. 81% of those respondents indicated their friends' post, things that their friends talk about, far outweigh anything else you can say. Companies spend millions of dollars to try to make an impact, try to make a difference. But if you don't pay attention and speak to people in the manner that they want to be spoken to, you're going to fail. People used to look at your website, people used to look at your ads. Now, they look at your social footprint. What are you doing within the community? What are you doing in business? You have to engage them. You have to create these touch points. It's no longer about communication. It's about communication, it's about engagement, it's about activation. The power doesn't fall with you. Think about yourselves. Put yourself in the position where you think of your own company and your own business. How would you respond to the things you do? Are you thinking differently? Would it excite you? The things you do as your own companies, as your own businesses, as your own trades, within your own responsibilities, so the things you do, would you be so excited about it you'd be willing to share them with your social community? If the answer is no, you have to rethink. You're at a point where this is an attention-based economy. And within the attention-based economy, attention is the new currency. We have fun, we've laughed and stuff, but the truth of the matter is that is really where we are going, globally. How do you not only gain that attention, how do you drive that content, how do you think differently, but ultimately use the information to make better decisions and connect with people? There's a great quote from Jack Welch, right? If the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the end is near. If you're doing the same things today as you were doing 10 years ago, I think this quote speaks directly to you. If you're doing the same things you were doing 5 years ago, you're right there on the cusp. If you stop and think about how things are different, we have quite a diverse group in here, right? How many of you are under the age of 30 in this room? No, hands up. Okay. Do any of you have hardline home telephones? Not one. You know this idea of defining a millennial? It's pretty interesting because I think it's supposed to be defined in the sense of this age bracket because of what they do. But if you stop and think, I could be a millennial. I'm a new adapter, early adapter. I'm a marketing technology enthusiast. I don't have a hardline home telephone. So it can't just be defined and sort of put in this centralized sort of nice, neat little box anymore. You have to think about things differently. If you don't, you could end up like this. How many of these stories have we heard? True story. Wayne Huizinga, Blockbuster, had staff members come to him at one point that were younger and said, Mr. Huizinga, by the way, we really think we're onto something big. We have this ability to online ultimately do some stuff where we can rent things and do this. They were thrown out of the office. We rent videotapes. That's what we do. Eastman Kodak. True story. They had individuals that came to them years before with a digitally engineered camera. This is going to be the wave of the future. You have to look at this. As a company, this is where we need to do. We need to think differently. Get that out of here. We sell film. Don't ever let me see that again. Those employees were fired. Look where Kodak is. Look where Blockbuster is. You have to think differently. You have to change. You have to evolve. Best Buy. At one point, Best Buy was looked at one of really the groundbreaking companies, right, because of how they went about doing things. Pretty cool. In their lobby back in Minneapolis, they actually had hospital beds with signs of brands and companies that had gone either out of business or bankrupt. Circuit City, all these other companies. Then they had a couple that were in there as well that they said, basically we're in ICU, ready to die. And that was a point for every employee to walk by and see this and remind them that you can go from here to here very quickly. But then Best Buy lost their way. Then they started to try to compete, no longer as a brand, but as a commodity. And they went from Best Buy to Please Buy. Seriously, they went from a point where Harvard was actually doing business studies on them to the point where they were trying to compete with everybody simply on price. And just like that McDonald's and Starbucks coffee, if you're going to try to compete only on price, you're no longer a brand. What can you make? How can you think differently? If you had the Play-Doh sitting in front of you right now, what would it be? Would it just be a blob of Play-Doh? Or would you make something? Can you see it? Would you think differently? Challenge yourself. Is it just window washers? Or is it superheroes? Is it just a camera? Or is it an extension into who you are? Is it just headphones? Or is it an orchestra? It starts with you. Band-Aid. Go from Eastman Kodak, go from Best Buy to this is what we do, this is what we are, this is our core business, to Band-Aid to the point where they're designing things that are wearables that work within doctors' offices, within these chips, which will now tell you everything you need to know. Evolve. The rate of evolving and the rate of change within that company far exceeds what's happening on the outside. They're no longer just a bandage company. They're an innovation company. This video is great, right? So the video you're going to watch right now is pretty cool, and the reason why is they thought differently. Take the SPCA and Mini Cooper. They decided that what they wanted to do was, we don't have a big budget, we don't have a lot of money, but what we want to do is we have a lot of older dogs that are unfortunately just being left in these kennels. These dogs are being there, and they're great dogs and such. They really are. Hey, Minnie, we'd love to do something with you. Well, we could run an ad, we can buy a TV campaign, we can put stuff together, or we could do something like this. Can you run that video, please?
Here. Good. Wet.
Turn on the ignition. Let's go. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good boy. Good boy. Ready?
Ride with me
Good boy.
on the streets
I
right
think this is
now.
fun cruising right here.
Hot issue on the
Right?
streets right now. Yeah. Ride with me. Ride with me. Roll with me. Let's
Good
roll.
boy.
Let's
What a
roll.
sharp-looking dog, isn't he?
Yeah.
Good.
All day.
Right.
All night now.
Good boy. Ready? Ready?
So you go from having an idea to you then go to having an idea that reaches millions of people. We have a problem with our buses. Let's just add more buses. We have a problem with our people. Let's bring them in. Let's do an employee review. Let's just do all the normal stuff. Or you can have Porter the dog. Think about how you can make a difference. It's no longer good enough just to reach someone. You have to reach them in the moment that counts, in the manner that counts, and ultimately in the way that they want to be approached. How are you going to think differently? Thank you. Thank you. We do have some time. If anybody would like to ask some questions, I don't know if this is the form you'd like to do, but happy to answer any questions or whatever the case. Yes? By the way, thank you for not throwing the exercise ball at me. She said beforehand if I was bad, she was going to throw an exercise ball at me before. Okay. Sure. Well, the conversations are taking place whether you get involved or not, right? So one of the things I would tell you is that you have to listen to the conversation. But more importantly, you have to engage them to the point where you don't run from these bad ideas. You don't run from these bad conversations, because at the end of the day, social doesn't allow you to do that. So as a case study, when I was with the Devils, we actually took, even though it was managed from someone internally, we went out and we found 25 of our most socially savvy and fanatical hockey fans, and we brought them in and basically deputized them, ambassadored them, if you would, and we allowed them to ultimately become the social outreach program of the team. Now, mind you, that takes a lot of big gulps as you're sort of going through that, because most businesses don't want to hand over that control of what your message is. But what we found was, as those conversations took place, the validity and the strength of the conversation that was taking place from fan to fan was much more impactful than anything we could have said as an organization. So we couldn't run from it, and truth be told, a lot of times there were bad things that were happening. But before, where we would just run and hide from it, we actually became very proactive in the matter. And what we found was it wasn't us that had to protect ourselves or defend ourselves, but other fans would be the ones who would actually come to our defense. So the strength and ultimately how loud that message started to become at that point was even better result than we could have ever wished for. This is an easy crowd. If you guys were drinking, there'd be a lot more questions. Yes?
So I like the, let's see, is this on? There we go. Yeah, so I like the idea of think differently, right?
Yes.
I think we all do. You're very persuasive, and I agree. I mean, that things are changing faster than ever. But when we talk about organizations that many of us manage or work within, you have an organizational culture, and often that culture fights thinking differently. It fights change. From your experience, what are some tools? How do you get the executive directors, how do you get the key decision makers on board with thinking differently?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you don't become a blockbuster.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first of all, I would tell you, if you think your difficulties, are, which I'm sure are immense, try sitting across the room from an NFL owner who spends hundreds of millions of dollars on players from the team, and he wants to know why the stadium isn't filled, right? So the truth of the matter is you have to create buy-in. And it can't be just a single person. It was never, in any of the instances or successes that I've had with my teams, it wasn't just us in the marketing group who ultimately had these successes. It was about educating, about creating buy-in, and ultimately allowing for these people to become sort of ambassadors for what we were doing as an organization themselves. But education was a big part of it. And we talked a little bit about it when I was able to speak to the group in New York. You also have to be willing to change and evolve. You know, I had someone tell me a long time ago, 4 plus 5 equals 9, but 8 plus 1 also equals 9. So there's more than one way to get to an end result. And you have to be willing to sometimes listen. You know, it's not just a matter of just because you think this is the case. There's some great ideas that come from other people within the organization. So you have to create internal ambassadors before you can ask for, external evangelists. Yes?
Just a follow-up question to your explanation about the social media ambassadors for the New Jersey Devils.
Yes.
Did you compensate them? And because, of course, those of us who work on the communication side are all about the authentic voice, and then you get into these gray areas where, well, of course they said what you wanted. You paid them to say that.
So we didn't pay them. And actually, it was much more of a badge of honor that they were doing it simply because they loved the brand. So it wasn't a matter where it was a paid position. These people, in a lot of instances, worked just as hard, if not harder, than some paid employees. I mean, they would respond at midnight, they would respond at 5 in the morning, they would respond on holidays, on weekends, and the reason for that is it wasn't work. It was something that they were passionately involved with. So in order for us to give them that chance, for us to give them that stage, that platform, it became something that they wanted to do, not just simply because they had to do it. Yes?
Michael, what's your, if I ask you what your personal brand is, what would you say it is, and how are you capitalizing on it for the Grand Prix?
So my personal brand myself, I would say it's authentic. I would say that I'm extremely probably transparent. In some cases, if you ask people, probably more than I should be. And I would say that there's a conviction. You know, and I think that that's something I learned early on where you need to believe in what it is that you're saying and what it is that you're doing. And I don't want to bore you guys with stories, but this speaks to your exact point. So early on in my career, when I was at J. Walter Thompson, I was fairly young, and I had a big meeting with a whole bunch of Ford executives, which can be pretty daunting. And you're in a room like this, and they have a big U-shaped table. And I was walking out and presenting, and we were talking about the creative, and it was for Mustang. And I positioned it, we talked about the strategy, we talked about everything we could do, and I was very passionate about what I was talking about. And after we ran through all the creative, the worst thing that could happen was crickets. Just absolute crickets, just dead silence. To which point I started asking questions. And I won't BS you and tell you that I had this planned ahead of time, but it came to me at the moment, where as they started responding, they said, Michael, you know we love you, but that was awful. Awful, terrible. I said, hey, you know what, Dave, that's fantastic, I appreciate it. I started asking people, hey, TJ, what do you think? Michael, did you not hear what Dave said? That was terrible. I understand. Hey, Jack, what about you? And we went around the room, and afterwards, it was that conviction that really got me through that, because my point was, guys, I don't want you to like it. Each and every one of you are over the age of 50. There's not one of you in this room that would ultimately purchase that vehicle. There's not one of you in this room that we've actually created this message for. Now, if your kids come in and they don't like it, we have a problem. If your grandkids come in certain instances and tell us they don't like it, we have a problem. But the fact that you despise it tells me we're right on strategy, right? The fact that you tell me you don't like the music and the cuts are too fast and you don't like that color, you're old crotchety men. You're right. We're right on strategy. But it's back to that point of being very transparent, very authentic, but ultimately being convicted in, in your beliefs and what it is that you're doing. As far as the Grand Prix is concerned, it's an interesting dynamic because unlike football, where you're ultimately you're marketing and selling and branding a team, F1 is really different. And it's crazy to think this, but it's less about the race and it's more about the lifestyle. So there'll be people that come from all around the world that'll come to New York. We'll have 120,000 people, and out of those 120,000, over 45,000 of those people will come from other destinations throughout the world. And they will spend thousands of dollars on each ticket. And they may actually do more time in the bar or eating than actually watching the race itself. It's crazy. But it's because of the lifestyle and ultimately the way that they're connected. They may just be out to go to an executive chef tasting as they may go to a Formula One event. But at the end of the day, our biggest problem we'll face is years 2 through on, right? Because the first year, the novelty of the race will sell itself. But to make sure that we create an environment, an experience, and an opportunity and a reason for them to come back for the years after is really where our biggest challenge will lie. Yes?
Follow-up question on the Formula One. So here's this noisy, smiley, circling around circus, and suddenly people say, well, we want electric vehicles going around, it doesn't make noise, there's no motor heads there. You still adopt it, but how can you bridge that?
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that because people have this idea of what to expect, right? The big wow and the little wow we talked about. So after the first year with this circuit, they made changes to the regular fuel-powered vehicles, and people complained. People complained that this is not the F1 that I'm used to. It wasn't as loud. For those of you, I know we have people here from other parts of the world, but there's a sense where F1 is a visceral experience. And I tease, and I know we're in the deep south, but they're not just making left-hand turns, right? So I'll get that later. I know. Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, it's interesting because there's a smell of the high-octane gas. There's the sound of these cars that are going by. You feel it in your chest. You see them as they go by. So there's a visceral component to it. And it's interesting. Sound was one of those biggest components that people missed on.
So how did BMW deal with this? BMW has an electric vehicle, and they still sell it as a BMW vehicle. How did they bridge that, you think?
Well, I wouldn't dare speak on behalf of BMW, but it's part of that evolution, and it goes back to that part of that educating, because I think there's people, here's a point where you have an older fan base who have become accustomed to what they want, and you have a younger fan base that's coming up with an idea of where they want to see things to go, and it's an interesting fine line. There's an old saying, when you walk the razor's edge, just remember you're going to get cut. So there's a point where you need to make sure that you respect and you value and you acknowledge that older fan base, but you have to do it in a manner where you're welcoming in those new fans as well. Anyone else? Yes.
Harkening back to your example about the guy with the camera that had the digital camera before digital cameras were common.
Can you speak up just a little bit? I'm sorry.
Sorry. The example that you have of the digital camera
With
before digital
Kodak?
cameras were common. Yes. The example of a video streaming service before there were video streaming services at Blockbuster.
Yes.
How do you move things forward to think differently in an industry where change isn't really welcome?
Yeah, in certain instances you can't. And I think that the business world is littered with those examples of businesses that thought that we're not going to evolve, we're not going to change, and we're just simply going to stay the course of who we are. And slowly but surely, just like the dinosaurs, they're going to become extinct. I think it takes an instance where it's not just, again, from my role, it cannot be just the marketing guy in the corner office who's trying to preach to everyone why we have to change. There has to be an enlistment of ownership. There has to be an enlistment of the board, of the CEO, of the owner, really ultimately where it then is able to drill down to everybody, right? Because at the end of the day, it can't just be one or two people that are ultimately prophetizing what you're doing from a brand. It has to be something that's within sort of the soul of the company itself. And if you recognize that change is inevitable and you recognize that change is good, as long as you educate people and you involve them, I would tell you that in a lot of cases, if you show them why it's positive, in a lot of cases, you'll eventually get them to the point. And I will also tell you in certain instances, you can't. When I was with the 49ers, one of the most humorous stories I would tell you is we pushed this idea of a campaign of faithful. And the reason why is when you're 2 and 14, you don't have a lot of positives to talk about what's happening on the field. And you had a lot of the older fans that were leaving, and we had no new fans coming in. So going back to this idea where we were making sure it wasn't the team speaking, but it was fans to fans, we really pushed this idea through marketing that these are definitions of what it means to be faithful. And we actually went to the fans and had them help come up with what these things were. So faithful is every Sunday, rain, shine, or fog. Faithful is refusing to visit your in-laws in Dallas. Faithful is, naming your sons Dwight and Clark, those sort of things and stuff. And it was interesting because I got called into the owner's office one time, and he was furious. And he was, because we monetized and we did other things with it. We created merchandise and such. And he held up this shirt and he said, "Michael, look at this. We're going to find out who's doing this." And he held up a shirt, and they ultimately had the saying wrong. It was every Sunday, fog, rain, or shine, whatever the case may be, it was wrong. And he goes, "This is awful." And I said, "This is fantastic." And he said, "Why?" I said, "They love it so much. You actually have people trying to create their own. They're trying to counterfeit these and sell them because they're in such demand." And what happened at that point was then I'd get called into his office because new sayings that he had come up with that he wanted, which, by the way, becomes quite difficult when you're trying to explain to one of only 32 people in the world that own an NFL team why that saying isn't a good one. But it all goes back to the gentleman's point over here before. It's about creating buy-in. You have to do it. And we would do instances where we would bring everyone together, whether it was receptionists or whether it was the CFO, everyone together, and we would talk about what our messaging is. We'd create that buy-in. We'd create that ultimately, that intangible connection with people, no matter who you were, because at the end of the day, they're your greatest asset. They really are. Anyone else? No medicine balls or exercise balls thrown at this point, so we're good. Yes?
I think you're very inspiring, and I think you've given us a lot to think about, and I really appreciate it. And I'd also had the honor of hearing you speak in New York earlier this year at the Kellen event.
Thank you.
And so it was great to hear it again. It's a good reminder, and that's good. But we're hearing a lot about your successes. Mm-hmm. Can you share with us a story where the outcome wasn't a success,
Sure.
and how that changed your approach or your thinking, or because not everything turns out the way we want it to turn out sometimes?
No. Yeah, in a lot of cases it doesn't, right? I mean, people nowadays, the new sexy term there is fail fast. Everybody talks about, they sort of stole the idea from Silicon Valley and the dot-coms, which is fail fast. And when I was in San Francisco, I got a chance to meet a lot of folks with Google, and they have an interesting idea, which is we fail 100 times a week, but within those failures come really some extraordinary successes. Unfortunately, I've had lots of failures, right? But I think it's a matter of recognizing what you can learn from it. You know, let's see, what would be the best one to sort of to share? So here's one. We came up with this idea in which we were going to do basically paperless tickets. And this whole idea was paperless tickets because this is the wave of the future. The CFO talked about the money we would save from not doing printed tickets. It'll allow us to capture data, and big data is the greatest thing in the world. And it was going to be positive for everybody because with these was going to become a new freedom where then people were going to be able to share them and do some other things with. But what we came away with is we took away the human side, the romance side of people wanting to actually keep tickets. And we took away this instance where people were able to use something and go back and use it as a memory. I was there for this play. I was there for this game. At the end of the day, having a card, a plastic card, just doesn't have that same sort of soul to it, if you would. And while it seemed like it was something that was good on paper, and while it seemed like it was something that good through the data and the research that we did, the real life sort of component and aspect to it just didn't own up to what it was. And how we responded to it was we owned up to it. You know, this is something we tried, but we were very open and honest and say, look, we hear you loud and clear, and this is something we will change and go back to. But you know what we also had was some people that told us we do like it. So we eventually got to a point where we created a hybrid to offer a choice. Some people that wanted paper tickets and some people that wanted the paperless tickets. So what we did inadvertently is offer a greater value back to them because we were personalizing it for them in that manner to give them a better experience. So, but at the end of the day, you have to be accountable, you have to be transparent, you have to be convicted in what you're doing, but you also have to come back to realize, again, 5 + 4 = 9, but so does 8 + 1. There's going to be several ways that you can get to the end result. Yes?
What keeps you up at night? And
Oh, God.
What are you doing to make sure you get a good night's sleep?
First and foremost, the fact that I have a teenage daughter going into high school. That keeps me up every night. The rate of change. The rate of change and the ability to try to understand that rate of change. Because it happens at such an incredible speed that it's really hard to keep pace. But the other thing that keeps me up at night is trying to police myself, trying to manage myself and my team and people I speak to and such, to not just jump on whatever the latest fad is simply for saying you want to do it, because it's going to be detrimental to you. You need to have a strategy as to how you're going to attack things, because if you try to do everything, if you try to do LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and Google Plus and Snapchat and Instagram and all these other ones, inevitably what you're doing is you're doing a whole bunch of things sort of mediocrely, right? I mean, you're only doing them really well. And at the end of the day, if you get in one of these places and people start to communicate with you and you don't respond in a timely, sort of responsive manner, you've actually done yourself more of a disservice than you've done from a positive by getting involved or engaged in the first place. So the speed and the rate of change keeps me up constantly.
Okay, we're going to take Michael.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much.